and we welcome Courtney Allen of Extreme Reach for a thought-provoking adventure into the world of disruption. And maybe it's not something to be feared, but rather something to inspire us, to spark our imagination, to help us and our culture grow and change for the better. Courtney?
Thank you so much for that introduction. And hi, everyone. I'm Courtney Allen, the Director of Client Relations at Extreme Reach. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And it truly is my absolute pleasure to be with you all closing out the day and discussing some truths, some of my experiences, and also revelations that have really been especially important in both my personal and my professional adventures, and how disruption has opened pathways of opportunity in my life and also in the world around me. But before we get started, we really cannot open up a conversation on disruption without sincere commitment and support and participation in the work to really dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism that continues to exclude and erase the legacy of Indigenous communities around the globe. Let us all take a moment to acknowledge the sacred La Nape community, Land of the La Nape, sorry about that, La Nape. I am broadcasting from Weehawken, New Jersey, the border of Union City. And this space was commonly known as the Land of La Nape. And let us all just honor the people from which the name Weehawken is actually derived and pay respect to these original stewards of the land. Let us give voice to the legacy, to the lives, and the impact, and also the ongoing resistance of the Lenape diaspora. They truly are the past, they truly are the present, and they are the future protectors of this land and so many of the sacred land we all occupy, and they still exist. I really do encourage you all to pay tribute and respect the legacy, the current state, and the futures of our Indigenous communities. So, a brief intro into who I am and how I became the Director of Client Relations here at Extreme Reach. So many moons ago, I was born into a rather large family, 6 sisters, 2 brothers to be exact, along with 5 male cousins who are more brothers than anything. And we grew up in this really small home, and somehow it never felt cramped. It was full of love, it was full of creativity and excitement and laughter, and this chorus of little unique voices trying to find a way and find our ways, both as individuals, but also as this inseparable unit. And finding our place in the world was really, really important at an incredibly young age. So I personally began to answer my inner light and follow my passions very early in life. And as Director of Client Relations, one of my key functions is analyzing client workflow and finding the best solutions to fit their needs, then guiding them through that process. A lot of that is training. A lot of that is teaching. And as a child, I realized that was one of several things I truly, truly love to do. So possibly even before I could talk, I was gathering stuffed animals for my little classroom of sorts. And throughout most of my school years, I tutored neighborhood students and neighborhood children. So empowering people with information and understanding the tools to navigate the world with confidence has really always been an important part of my life journey. And those moments in my imaginary classroom, chalking bedroom doors with my enthusiastic makeshift lesson plans, all of that really helped to shape the style and inject the sincerity and dedication that I pour into all of my interaction with customers. I love that I get to carry those elements of my childhood and my teen years and my adulthood into my work at Extreme Reach. So speaking of those early years, I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and growing up in the heart of the most beautiful tree-lined streets and the unexpectedly magical sunsets. I am a Brooklynite through and through, absolutely. And living my formidable youth during the slow rise into this sudden wave of gentrification, I found myself in the gut of a really painful and deeply heartbreaking shift, right? It was an up close and personal experience with the best and the worst of cultural change. I was barely an adult, and I was watching the world that had nurtured and inspired me become washed over with new landscapes and new values that were no longer really concerned with my interests. There was cultural displacement, right? With Black-owned neighborhoods and restaurants and disturbances in the ecosystem of these long-standing communities. And I truly began to feel othered in my own home. People were priced out of areas that I had once enjoyed. And I actually went to school in downtown Brooklyn, and I was simultaneously fascinated and horrified as I watched these multi-million-dollar high-rises go up directly across the street from low-income housing projects. I watched neighbors leave the city for more affordable living, and there was an overall shift in values. So many people like me, having lived in low income areas, again, began to feel othered. And I watched organic grocery stores pop up, which was beautiful, and adorable little coffee shops and diners that somehow made me feel and gave the impression that the old lacking infrastructure was not good enough for the new residents, but it was good enough for the old. I actually once had an acquaintance complain to me that she needed new residents in her neighborhood, right? Because the low income population just didn't value organic produce that she needed. I adjusted her ignorance with a smile on my face. And needless to say, that was our last interaction. But in this, I felt like the pulse of Brooklyn, which so many generations of us had built, was being involuntarily removed from our lives and implanted elsewhere for new prosperity, right? New prosperity that we had never been considered for. So this unfortunate phase of disruption felt like a silent, slow moving tragedy. So much so that, again, while Brooklyn will always be a huge part of who I am and my identity, it no longer felt like mine. So this transformation really began to inspire me to seek out bold, thoughtful, and defiant disruption, right, as a means of growth and evolution. Things like protest and art, community building, and all of those action that would really create opportunity. So for many, disruption can be perceived as destructive, like I had experienced, right? But if we look around the world and throughout history, disruption is often the prelude to great change and important progress. Defined, disruption is a break or an interruption in the normal course or continuation of some activity or process. And while this can be a really frightening thought, it is also a very powerful revelation, right? Disruption shakes the table and it challenges the status quo to really rethink and reshape the world. And we have all watched advancements in technology really elevate the human experience, right? Moving business and society forward in beautiful, beautiful ways. And a really simple thought is what automobiles did to the world of horse and carriages, right? And how historical revolutions have confronted systems of oppression and opened pathways towards liberation. And even right now, we're living through the ongoing criticism and demands from social unrest, born out of social unrest, and watching this really create conversations and create actions towards the progress around the globe. We're seeing dominant structures fade away with the rise of technology and new information that renders the old obsolete. So from a business perspective, Disruption has absolutely always been at the core of Extreme Reach's business and our success. So when I joined Extreme Reach back in 2014-ish, the theme of disruption was really building up around the industry, and I was curious and excited about the idea of revolutionizing the industry, and I really wanted to be a part of this radical concept. So back in 2013, our organization posed this question, this really important question, right? And with the creative execution aspect of video advertising being bogged down in a manual process that really does introduce a lot of unnecessary costs, significant delays, and opportunities for mistakes, compliance issues, so on and so forth. Was the process broken, or was it badly bruised? So while the TV and ad industry was actually quite vibrant and healthy at this time, the process for delivering creative hadn't really changed in years, and people were still shipping their commercials and tapes to TV stations on physical tapes. And Extreme Reach and our technology stepped in and truly single-handedly transformed the way and the speed at which this finished creative was able to travel from the edit suite to TV destinations. And it was really an instantaneous process. And that's something that we were able to offer clients. But how did we get here? We assessed areas for improvement and innovation, right? We heard the criticism and the willingness to disrupt the old, but the familiar. And then we were able to fuel new business ventures and technology, right? And catapulted us into a space where we were trusted industry leaders. So we're seeing a lot of these same questions now being asked in society, right? We're questioning structures of power. We're questioning systems that have always been in place and accepted, and now asking ourselves, is this reformable? Or is this something that we have to completely reimagine and reintroduce into the world? And that has inspired so much beautiful change. It has inspired so much thought-provoking progress around the world. Let's just talk a little bit about video, right? And how this world of video that we all work so hard to move forward has become vast and powerful, and what was once the stronghold of television sets and primetime viewing has really escaped those confines. And now we can find video on just about any device. And it's still in your living room, of course. It's in your hand, but it's also on the road with you. It's at your checkout counters. It's at gas station pumps. It's on sides of buildings. And with this comes the opportunity to really engage bigger audiences in new ways and reach them in never before possible levels of precision and targeting and presenting them with compelling stories that resonate in new ways. So from an industry perspective, of course, those stories are always the heart of a marketer's campaign. But in recent years, in recent months, weeks, and even days, the accessibility of video and information on these non-TV screens have inspired calls for change, right? These screens have become the spark of revolution, of disruption. Increased accessibility and greater awareness inspires that demand for change. So like last month, for instance, the power of video across all different screens provided new education around the events of the Tulsa massacre and actually led to the first US president in history to ever publicly acknowledge this atrocity. So many of my esteemed and respected colleagues had never heard of the Tulsa massacre. And now they were taking in this new knowledge, this new history, right? A new history to them, but something that had been a trauma that was carried through generations for other communities. There's also this widespread news of 215 bodies of Indigenous children found at Canadian residential schools, right? And this generated interest and rightful concern around this hidden history. So this business of video that our technology disrupts, it also sparks change across the globe. And with video as more than entertainment, it is now a form of historical evidence that makes it so much more difficult to refute and rewrite history at the disservice of marginalized and underrepresented groups. So simply put, the power of video has the power to change. But change. Humans can be really, really funny when it comes to change, even when the advantages seem obvious. Sure, everyone applauds innovation, we applaud transformation and progressive thought in hindsight, but the prospect of change is really very rarely easy in the beginning. But we all need to keep pushing ourselves in the name of progress, right? Disruption and change may be uncomfortable, but out of it comes new perspectives, out of it comes new opportunities. And at Extreme Reach, this notion of disruption that has inspired the technology, that empowers the creativity, that empowers our customer experience, all of that is also woven into the fabric of our culture, right? And that informs the way we value our people. Our work to create a liberated, all-inclusive experience is something that we really take seriously, and not only in our service offerings, but more importantly for our employees within these intangible virtual walls of Extreme Reach. So almost a year ago, back in July 2020, Extreme Reach formed our DEI committee, our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And it was established really to add some formality and focus and accountability around our long-standing commitment to diversity and equitable, inclusive workspaces. So our focus and on ER's business environment and our company culture and professional practices really do help us to ensure Extreme Reach is a great place for people to work, right? It's diverse, it's equal, and it's always inclusive. And our mission is always to collaborate with team members at all levels across the organization to really create new policies in the essence of equity, respectability, visibility, opportunity, and inclusivity. And how do we do that? Really by establishing new and enhanced initiatives that really make every individual feel free and safe to bring their truest selves to work. So in doing this work, we recognized the direct tie into social justice, right? Which can't be severed and it can't be ignored. And from a social perspective, our core objective is always advocacy and celebration. And we aim to amplify team member voices and to cultivate a safe workspace for identity expression and representation, right? We've collaborated with queer and trans team members to design and roll out pronoun training, right? Providing that necessary education and encouraging not only the use of pronouns and email signatures, but the use of proper pronouns and respected pronouns in our day-to-day lives. So we are really passionate about providing impactful education that challenges biases and encourages exposure to other experiences, right? Our team has curated a number of custom webinars and events celebrating diverse cultures and experiences, which have all truly generated a great deal of education awareness. We launched a two-part series for Black History Month. In March, we organized a guest speaker to provide education on period poverty. And last month, we invited esteemed activists from the AAPI community to speak to our teams. And we are currently very proudly celebrating both Pride and Indigenous history throughout the month of June. So outside of that, of course, we are honing all of our focuses on career growth and recruitment opportunities, prioritizing diversity in our qualified candidates. And of course, we are refreshing policies and procedures to further protect and uplift our team. So this is not by any means business as usual. And I have never worked in a company that has nurtured and supported this level of advocacy in such a bold and passionate way. And while our committee is absolutely still young, we have been able to inspire participation, both active and passive. So our tendency to disrupt has found its way into supporting these massive cultural shifts that we are experiencing in the nation and worldwide. And we are proud to break these corporate norms that would reject social justice as an element of diversity, equity, inclusion, right? And we're continuing along the path of education, empowering, uplifting, and giving voice to marginalized groups within our larger ER community. And so for us, this is about taking risks that many of our team members have never experienced in corporate settings. And we're working to innovate a new path forward in both our business and in our culture. So that commitment of mine that I had talked about a little earlier, to seek out positive impact of disruption, that's still within me. And so when I think about how I grew up in that small apartment in Brooklyn with my many siblings, full of unique little people, all living their own light and creating space for each other's voices and literally celebrating our similarities and differences, teaching and learning from one another, I am reminded that there is always space for everyone to be included and everyone to be uplifted and everyone to be provided opportunity to flourish. So in an idealistic yet realistic goal of ours, this is something we should all be working towards, right? And we should all be prepared to confront that which has served some, but not all. We should all be willing to advocate for others, decenter ourselves when necessary. And it really does mean something special to tap into that in my career and be a co-conspirator in the process. And I'll end with this, right? We all have the power to disrupt, even at the seemingly smallest levels. And that can look like speaking up and out against systems of oppression. It can look like adjusting biases in ourselves and those we love, surrendering privilege to pass the mic to those whose voices have been muted, or even offering someone a seat at the table when we recognize their identities have been erased from the conversation. This has been a personal reflection, right? And so you may have heard a lot of I's and me's, but this work truly is always about the collective experience. And I hope that we are never satisfied until the injustice and the inequities that fuel our work have all been eradicated. And with that, before we turn to questions, I'd just like to take a moment to wish everyone a happy Pride Month. And for our folks in Canada, a happy National Indigenous History Month. And truly, I encourage you all to dive into some of the plentiful resources that are available online and in this video form that we all help to power in this industry. Thank you so much. And I'll turn it over for any questions.
Courtney, this is just an amazing story, both personal and global at the same time. Thank you for sharing this. We do have a question that just came in from the room about how do you approach sort of the coaching and training of a workforce to understand and adopt this, because this is more than just a presentation. This is a way of life. You're imbuing the organization with a way of life. How do you approach sort of training and coaching for that?
Yeah, it's always a collaborative process, right? So there's not a single voice that's leading and guiding our initiatives. We have a number of subcommittees within our diversity, equity, and inclusion larger group. And so we always get feedback from a lot of different voices. And from that, we're able to really consider how different people learn and consider all of those nuances. And so we offer different forms of education. We offer live webinars where we can have conversation. We offer reading materials, we offer video materials as well. So we're always thinking about how individuals are able to digest information, and we're trying to pace that also along the way. And I think that helps with how this resonates and impacts our team.
And I think maybe time for one more question. You opened with the land acknowledgement, and actually thank you for that. It's something that perhaps we don't hear enough of or experience enough of. Can you elaborate a bit on that, sort of the intent and purpose?
Right, so the land acknowledgement, it really is just a simple but powerful way to show respect and a step towards correcting some of the stories and the practices historically that have erased Indigenous people and history. And it's something that's practiced in pretty commonly in countries like New Zealand, where there's a huge Indigenous population, Australia, Canada, and also tribal nations within the United States. So it is a slow moving acknowledgement that I think that more people are starting to embrace. We see it happening more in educational institutions in the States. And while it is becoming a bit more popular, it's not as regularly done as it should be. So I do encourage folks to take the time, research where who your original stewards are, right, on the land in which you're living, and pay that respect when you are presenting or just showing up in that space.
Well, thank you so much, Courtney. A half hour is clearly not enough to do proper justice to this topic, but I think you've really rounded out our day in magnificent fashion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, I appreciate it, and I'm glad to have been here.